It's another Football Friday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, joined by our college football coverage team with some cool music still playing in my ear. That's our columnist, Jenny Carlson.
Hello.
Our OU beat writer, Jason Kersey. And our OSU beat writer, Kyle Fredrickson. Guys, let's jump right in. Sooners and Cowboys are both favored. But our good friend Barry Trammell, who will be joining us shortly, has picked as his Big 12 upset of the week, TCU to beat the Sooners Saturday in Fort Worth. Jason, upset chances, percent chance the Sooners are upset on Saturday.
I'd say I would go 35% chance. I don't think that it's a huge chance they get upset. I still think OU wins the game, but TCU's ranked. They're confident. Their offense is a lot better this year than they were last year. Trayvon Boykin is playing really well. So, there's always the possibility when you go on the road.
Jenny, the Horned Frogs seem to be getting a lot of leverage from their win over Minnesota. They kicked them. And then Minnesota then went and did what? Beat Michigan, which is a fairly common occurrence these days. It's I think a 4-point spread. What would be your upset concern, or what level of concern would you have for the Sooners getting upset Saturday?
I would probably go a little lower on the percentage chances than Jason did, somewhere in the 20 to 25% chance. I mean, that would mean, if they played 10 times, TCU might win 2 or maybe 3. I don't have sort of the belief in TCU that I think some people do. I'm not going to answer for Barry. Don't put that one on me, Ricky Bobby. I'll let him answer when he gets on here. But, TCU's defense is always good. But if you want to throw around stats from this year, they played Samford, not Stanford, Samford. They've played Minnesota, which, okay, decent Big Ten team, but the Big Ten and decent is not exactly a big endorsement. And SMU, which just lost their coach. So, if you're going to say that all those statistics are glowing, well, yeah, they better be with those 3 games under your belt. I just think OU's offensive line and their run game is dominant. They can become dominant. They'll wear you down. It may not happen right away, but I think over the course of a game, that becomes a big problem for a lot of defenses, even a really good one like TCU. So, yeah, I think it's good TCU's gone to the spread. But, again, they've not played a really good defense yet. So how's Trayvon Boykin going to fare? How's that offense going to fare? I think that's a little bit unknown. So I'm not nearly as much on the upset potential of this game.
Jason, I'm a little hung up on Samford. I'm old enough to remember when Samford met Fred Sanford.
And Sons.
I'm coming to see you, Elizabeth. Coming to join you, Elizabeth. Let me give you one across the lip. That kind of Samford. Not a team anybody be quoting in a college football context. So I'm not very impressed by anything TCU has done to this point. However, this new offense intrigues me because here comes TCU, probably going to play a little differently than they have in the past when they played very close games with Oklahoma. 1-score games in Norman and in Fort Worth. And now here comes TCU to say they're going to spread it out a little bit. Sonny Cumbie's been imported from Texas Tech to do that, to oversee a more diversified offense. Is that a good thing for TCU in this matchup against the Sooners, or a potentially hazardous thing?
Oh, I mean, I definitely think it's a good thing. I mean, they've they've completely transformed their offense. They've tried to sort of, I guess, join the current climate in the Big 12 in terms of offense. And they hired Sonny Cumbie. He's was a quarterbacks coach at Texas Tech, and they seem to be doing well. But again, like you both said, it's hard to know just how good the offense is because they really haven't played anybody great yet. And I think this will be a real test for them. But one thing I think that OU has to their advantage, and Ryan Aber wrote about this a little bit today, is that OU has Baker Mayfield running the scout team, and he played for Sonny Cumbie last year at Texas Tech. So, he's essentially spent time going over this offense, sitting down with Mike Stoops. and sort of explaining the way it works. And I think that could be a big advantage to the OU defense.
Another advantage, Jason, you and Ryan have talked about this, the interceptions, the returns, the turnovers the OU defense is producing. TCU has played a more close to the vest game and stayed in games with the Sooners by letting its defense try to slow down the Sooners and not putting its offense in a position to lose. The Sooners are back in the takeaway game. Jenny and Jason, any chance that strategy could backfire against this Sooner team?
Well, I mean, I think obviously they're going to have to do something that they haven't done in terms of playing at a different level against OU. Whether it's offense that they haven't shown yet, or whether it's defensive strategies that might throw Trevor Knight and that offense for a loop. I don't know, but I do know that beating Minnesota or beating Samford or beating SMU is a whole different level of football than what OU is going to trot out there on both sides of the ball. Whether they're trying to be conservative or being a little bit more ball hawking, whatever OU is going to do, it's going to be a big step up from everything TCU has seen to this point.
That's two Samford references, setting a references in videos and podcasts for references to Samford. Jason, does TCU have the personnel to match up with the Sooners, especially offense to the Sooner defense?
I'm not sure if they do. I think that they're still figuring out how they want to run this offense. They haven't been recruiting players to run this offense, so I think that that might be a problem. I don't think that they have necessarily the horses to hang with OU. I picked a pretty close game, but I think in the end OU's defense probably comes up with a turnover at some key moment.
I will mention we're apologies for the tricky audio right now. A little bit of reverb in our ears and in what we're saying. We'll hopefully be able to fix that. Kyle, let's go to OSU. As you think about the Cowboys, Iowa State, let's play word association. What is it that you think about when you think about OSU, Iowa State?
Ooh, geez. Put me on the spot here. I guess we'll just go with kind of what the theme of my story is going to be on Saturday, which is bombs away. Through a few games here, we've seen Dax Garman's success with the deep ball, and I think against Iowa State, we're going to find out a little bit whether or not OSU is relying on that deep ball because they know it's Garman's strengths, or if they're actually playing against the schemes of what these defenses are trotting out against them. Because, through these first couple games, we've seen how successful Dax has been on that ball. But I think against Iowa State, we're going to see a little bit more of a conventional defense. Paul Rose in his pregame press conference for this matchup had really talked a lot about Dax's arm strength and the need to not leave those corners on an island with those deep threats on the outside, because they know that he has the skills to really burn them. So that's going to be something that we're really going to keep an eye on, because through these first few games, we've seen Garman's struggles in the intermediate passing game. Both of his interceptions last week were on, crossing routes that were within 20 yards, where one was way over his receiver's head and the other was low. Obviously, the struggles with the run game have been well documented. Coming into this week, Mike Gundy said he wants that number yards per carry average to be about 5. Right now, OSU's at 4.1. So this is kind of a game where we see a step forward from the early trends of this season as far as the OSU offense is concerned. And, it's a little bit of a small sample size so far. But as the more games that Dax Garman gets under his belt and the different defenses he sees, I think we're going to learn a lot more about what this offense's identity truly is.
You set up and served quite well, Kyle. I was setting you up to figure out what you were writing about. Of course, another word association that people play when they think about OSU and Iowa State is that devastating loss in Ames 2011, the year of the Cowboys' Big 12 championship season, the loss that really ruined their chances to compete for the BCS championship. That's always associated. Our buddy Anthony Slater, that was the first thing that came to his mind when we started talking about that game. But Jenny, you got another association for that game, and that is sort of one of the guys on the other sideline that really OU and OSU fans, they ought to appreciate a little bit. And you're writing about him for Saturday.
Yeah, writing about Paul Rhoads, which, it seems like because of that 11 loss at Iowa State that he would be, one of the top public enemies for anybody who loves anything Cowboy Orange. And I don't really get the sense that that's the truth. Obviously he didn't score the touchdowns or anything like that, but he's the face of that program that was, obviously the roadblock to playing for a national championship. So yet he just is, I think he's too likable, frankly. I mean, this week alone we saw, Brady Hoke in Michigan leave a quarterback in the game who was clearly concussed, staggering around. We see Charlie Weiss get fired because did anybody really ever think he was fired up about being the coach at Kansas? But here is Paul Rhoads at Iowa State, sort of a little engine that could program. And he just seems to love what he does. There's just a lot of fun evidence out there of his passion for Iowa State, for the Cyclones. At the top of the list is that "I'm so proud to be your football coach" speech that he gave after the Nebraska win a couple years ago. So you just never know when Paul Rhoads might have one of those YouTube moments. I don't think it's going to happen this week because I think Oklahoma State's the better team. Of course, I thought they were in 2011 as well. So I think Paul Rhoads is one of the more interesting characters in college football. And he probably flies a little under the radar because he is at Iowa State. But if you look around, it doesn't take very long before you see this is a guy who really loves what he's doing. He loves coaching college football. He's not hiding it. And I think that's something that's, sometimes refreshing when these coaches become very CEO button down like. I don't think Paul Rhoads is worried about any of that.
Let's bring in Barry Trammell, columnist for the Oklahoman, who's joining us. Barry, we're talking about OSU, Iowa State. We'll get to your upset pick of TCU over the Sooners in just a second. But Kyle's writing bombs away whether the Cowboys can sustain this deep ball attack that they had last week. Iowa State comes in. Barry, Dax Garman appears to have the big arm. Does this look more like is this the kind of quarterback that Mike Gundy really deep down wants? And do you think that they can sustain this bombs away approach throughout the rest of this season?
They can sustain it through the season, no doubt. Now, I don't know how well when they play the better teams. I think they're going to eventually have to run on somebody like Oklahoma, Baylor, Kansas State. I don't think you can just flip it around the whole game against a quality opponent. I do think this is the kind of quarterback that Mike Gundy wants, though. I think he prefers the pocket passer to the mobile guy. So I think this is what Gundy would prefer. That's what he's had the most success with.
Guys, the risk-reward of the bombs away approach, Kyle, I'll start with you on this. It's ingenious in a way. The Cowboys' intermediate struggles, which you've highlighted, the risk of throwing deep. Well, if it's intercepted, it's an arm punt, and you don't lose big in the field position war. Is there something else about this strategy that makes it work?
Yeah, I think you're right. And as far as the field position is concerned, and I think it's the same with just the risk on those passes. Dax has shown an ability to be accurate with those deep balls. But when he's not accurate, when he overthrows it, especially with that one-on-one coverage, there's a little bit less of a chance of that ball being intercepted. So, and you figure with how much this run game has struggled early on with these young offensive linemen, that Garmin's ability to stretch the field, once teams really start to respect that, it's going to open up the box and it's going to allow a lot more room for space for guys like Des Roland and Rennie Childs to finally start putting up bigger numbers and getting that yards per carry average up.
Cowboys offensive line, sort of a work in progress, of course. Joe Wickline left to join Charlie Strong's staff at Texas. The Cowboys didn't return a lot of starters there, so maybe that has something also to do with the running game. Guys, the big news in college football, of course, is last night out in the Pac-12, down goes Oregon. Arizona and Rich Rod pull off a big upset in a game. Barry, you and I were talking about this. It actually could have been worse. What does that big upset do to the landscape in the race for the college football playoff?
Well, I think it's the best news is for the SEC. I think this makes it more likely than ever that the SEC gets 2 teams in to the college football playoff. If you had an undefeated Big 12 squad, an undefeated Oregon, undefeated Florida State, then I don't think you're getting 2 SEC squads in. But if you start looking at one-loss teams, I think it's going to be hard to overlook an 11-1 SEC West team who might be sharing a division with the SEC champ. Let's say A&M goes 11-1 and Alabama goes 11-1, but Alabama beats A&M and goes ahead and wins the SEC title game. I think now it's more likely than ever that Alabama and A&M would make the 14 playoff. And the truth is, you can throw in a lot of different. You can put in Auburn into that equation, Mississippi State. There's a lot of different moving parts in the SEC West.
Okay, so I got a question about the playoff. Set me straight on this, because if a team that goes 11-1 and doesn't make the SEC championship game, used to be that would probably keep them out of the national championship, but that doesn't keep them out of the football playoff, right, Barry?
No, that's right. Winning the championship is a factor. It's a criteria, but it's not a requirement. So, if the SEC came into this year expecting to get 2 teams. Politically, they thought it. Confidentially, they thought it. And now with Oregon's demise, it looks more likely than ever.
Jason, is there any chance we're missing another point, though? Is it possible that the Pac-12 still has its favorite for BCS? No, Jason, we lost Jason. Is it possible, guys, that we lost a college football playoff in Oregon but not in the Pac-12? What if Arizona has just assumed that spot?
That's possible, but, this is an Arizona team that nearly lost to UTSA, a team that we all saw in Stillwater that OSU blew by. It's hard to imagine that they could be that team, but if they go undefeated, they're going to have beaten some decent teams in the Pac-12. I'm not real sure just how good the Pac-12's run of teams is this year, because they all keep having these losses that are unexpected, but if they're undefeated, how do you ignore them? I think they would have to go undefeated. There's no one loss that gets you there in my mind if you're Arizona. But if they do, how do you keep them out?
Kyle, what about Arizona? Jenny makes a great point. You saw UTSA, and they struggled to beat them. Is that a disqualifier for Arizona, and should we not take them seriously as a college football playoff Final Four candidate? Did we lose Kyle?
I think I was muted there, but yeah, as I was saying, I don't think that's a factor at all. I think early on in the season, I think a lot of these teams are trying to figure out what their identity is, and even if you win a close game against UTSA, I don't think that should impact you down the line, especially because if we're going to talk about Arizona going undefeated in the Pac-12, that means they're going to beat some real quality opponents, and with Rich Rod's offense and a number of points they're able to put up, if they're able to go all the way through and be undefeated, then absolutely they should be included.
Jason, November 1st, I think, is the date. UCLA against Arizona. An undefeated team could emerge from that game and still have an undefeated Pac-12 team. Are you ready to write the Pac-12 off with last night's results, or is it just substitution?
Oh no, I'm not ready to write the Pac-12 off because of last night. I'm not even necessarily ready to completely write Oregon off. I think that anything could happen between now and the end of the season. We've seen that a million times in college football where a team loses early and manages to come back. Now, I agree with what Kyle said. I don't think that the UTSA game should disqualify them at all. They're still undefeated, and if they win the rest of their games, there's no reason they shouldn't be included in the college football playoff. Yeah,
and I'm not saying that's a disqualifier either. It's one of those things that's hard to wrap your head around to call them a true contender at this point, because we saw the difference in what happened with UTSA from one week to the next. So, yeah, if they go undefeated, I don't think that disqualifies them at all. But still, I'm just thinking, man, they almost lost to UTSA, and we saw OSU just completely blow through UTSA. So that's my hang up in putting them in that upper echelon of teams truly competing for a spot in the playoff.
I mean, I would agree with Jenny. And I would agree because they have a freshman quarterback starting for the Wildcats. I mean, for them to go undefeated all the way through that Pac-12 schedule, I think it'd be shocking.
Guys, that game last night said way more about Oregon than it did Arizona. Arizona, the other day, had to beat California at home with a 20-something point comeback with a Hail Mary at the buzzer.
It was a good one, though.
Arizona's not going to run the table. Now, Stanford, maybe. UCLA, maybe. Oregon, I don't think is going to win out. But UCLA and Stanford are still contenders. But no, just I don't think Arizona is going to be any kind of Cinderella team this year.
Is a Pac-12 game featuring a national title contender played on Thursday or Friday night just a recipe for an upset? Shouldn't we have just seen this coming, Barry?
We've seen it before, Oregon State, Southern Cal, Oregon, Arizona with Mike Stoops back in the day, 2009 or whatever year it was. So we've seen this before, and it's I didn't see this coming because Arizona had been so sketchy. But Oregon's offensive line was not any good at all. They couldn't protect. They couldn't run very well, and Mariota was under constant harassment. So I think Oregon was exposed last night, and that's why I say it's good news for everybody else because you've got one less. You've got one less national contender.
Guys, let's end with upset talk. Of course, Barry stepped out there, not really on that big a limb. I mean, it's only a 4-point spread, 4, I believe, and picked TCU to knock off the Sooners. I'm going to get Barry to explain his upset pick, and then I'll come to the rest of you, and you can tell us what your upset pick is for Saturday and why. Barry, why the Horned Frogs over the Sooners?
Well, I always need a Big 12 upset special. I pick one every week. Let me ask you, do you like Iowa State and Stillwater? No. Does anybody like Kansas in Morgantown?
I don't
No.
like Kansas anywhere.
Me either. Does anybody like Tech in Manhattan? No. Does anybody think Baylor's not going to beat Texas by 50 points tomorrow? That leaves OU-TCU, and frankly, it's a classic setup for an upset. You've got a good defensive team. TCU has played Oklahoma tough the last 2 years. Haven't been very good, the Frogs, but they played OU within 2017 and 24-17. I think I don't know if Texas Christian's going to win, but I think it's a setup for the Frogs to pull the upset.
There for a while, you were reminding me of the death of the great feature Point and Counterpoint. You'll remember this, Barry. We used to run it in the Oklahoman on page 2. One staff member picks one side of an argument, the other staff member picks the other. And do you remember what killed Point Counterpoint, Barry?
Poor writing.
Not really believing what we argued would be the baseline for it.
Basically, we had a staff member whose name shall not be mentioned who wrote, I don't really believe this, but I'm contractually obligated to pick this side because the other guy picked the side I believe in. You're almost saying you're contractually obligated to pick against the Sooners.
No, what I'm saying, my upset picks every week, I'm not saying this team's going to win and I know it, or this team's going to win and I believe it. I'm saying watch out for this game. Maybe you don't see this as a potential upset or a potential pitfall, but this could go the other way very easily. And I think Oklahoma could go to Fort Worth tomorrow and lose.
Okay, guys, I'm sorry. Rephrase. Don't tell me your upset special. Tell me your watch out for this game special. Jenny?
Well, I did pick this as an upset, just like Barry did, and I think it's going to happen. I think Mississippi State's going to beat Texas A&M. That game's in Starkville, and it's going to be crazy. Mississippi State got that great road win at LSU a couple weeks ago. And, as much as I like Texas A&M's offense and Kenny Hill, I mean, he's been spectacular. and clearly they can score points. I'm still not convinced that Texas A&M defense is ready to stand up and win all these tough games. We saw them have to come back from a huge deficit a week ago against Arkansas. I think it finally catches up to them, and a defense that's not quite at that offense's level yet. Mississippi State pulls the upset. It's no maybe. It's going to happen.
That doesn't count. Mississippi State's favored.
Wait, what? They're ranked lower.
In our picks, when we made our picks, Mississippi State's the 1.5 point favorite.
Wait a minute. We're not talking about upsets. We're talking about the what? Watch out for this game special. So odds don't really matter. Come on. It's the watch out for this game special, Jason. What are you watching out for?
Oh, boy.
Oh, boy.
Sorry, Jenny.
Thanks, Jason.
I'm taking Kentucky over South Carolina. I think
Now,
South
that's an
Carolina,
upset.
I think South Carolina, they're not very good this year, but they're still a 7 or 8 point favorite over Kentucky. Kentucky's gotten better and better with Mark Stoops. They've come really close to winning some games, and I think they'll get it done against the
Guys,
Gamecocks.
that's a thinly veiled kiss up to the Stoops family by Jason.
No, it's not.
It's quite obvious. Kyle, save us. What do you got?
Okay, and this is a game that I didn't necessarily pick as an upset. I have Alabama winning, but watch out for Ole Miss. I mean, game day is going to be at the Grove. It's going to be an incredible atmosphere. Bo Wallace has had a great year through the first few games, and so I think that's one that the whole college football world's going to have their eye on, and there's going to be plenty of Ole Miss fans to back them up. It should be an amazing atmosphere.
So if you're keeping score at home, that's Barry's. You made me pick against the Sooners. Jenny's, I'm picking an upset that wouldn't be an upset. Jason's, I'm picking for the Stoops family. And Kyle, I didn't pick it, but it could happen. You guys are way out on the limb. I love it.
Jason, it's a good thing I'm not driving to Fort Worth with you. You'd
I
never hear
know.
the end of this.
I know.
I'm done with you. Get out of here.
You don't mean that.
That's all for this edition of
I
Football
love
Fridays.
you, Buster, too much.
But you can stay with the best coverage team every day at News OK and every morning in the Oklahoman. Be safe.